Mr. Mustard.
Is that why you got on all yellow?
No, that's because I'm from Detroit.
And Chris, he gave me $350 so that I could take you out.
Wow.
You weren't supposed to tell her.
This business has highs and lows, man. And you can be making, bank, and then it's gone for years, and so you have to go to the bank to take it up, and rainy days come very quickly in this industry.
What happened to Flex Alexander? He had it all: a hit show, a Hollywood career, and a beautiful family. But almost overnight, it all crumbled.
Not where we want to be, but we're not where we used to be.
From being a breakout star on One,
Now, hold on, man. You're supposed to be my boy. All right, I'm Flex Washington.
to losing his home, revealing everything on a reality show, and watching his career vanish into thin air. Here's what really happened to Flex Alexander, and how he went from One to being homeless. In the early 2000s, One was one of UPN's most promising sitcoms. Lighthearted, family-focused, and powered by the charm and likability of its lead, Flex Alexander. Not only did he star in the series, he also created and produced it. For a while, it seemed like everything he touched turned to gold. By season 4, One had found its groove, with a loyal audience and strong ratings. But then, something changed. Under new network leadership, UPN decided to revamp the show in its 5th season. The goal? Attract a different demographic.
They were like, yes, we're going in a different direction, but they were like, oh, we're not getting the numbers from your character. People do not watch this show.
But in doing so, they gutted everything that made One work. Suddenly, Flex's character, the emotional heart of the series, was demoted to a side role. The setting shifted, new characters were introduced, and the original father-daughter chemistry that fans loved, gone.
But no, what happened was the crazy thing. I got a call to my agent said, yo, these people want to meet.
The move backfired, ratings dropped, fans tuned out. And by the end of season 5, UPN quietly pulled the plug. There was no proper finale, no send-off, just silence. For Flex, it wasn't just a show being canceled, it was the rug being pulled out from under his entire career. Behind the scenes, Flex was reeling. He had invested years into the show, emotionally, financially, and professionally. It was his baby. And overnight, it was gone. The worst part? He hadn't planned for this. He wasn't sitting on a mountain of money. He wasn't locked into another project. He had bet everything on One. And now, he had nothing. This moment, the abrupt cancellation, the unexpected sidelining, the loss of creative control marked the beginning of a steep downward spiral, one that would soon cost him more than just a job. Because losing One wasn't just the end of a show, it was the beginning of losing everything. After One was canceled, Flex Alexander disappeared from the spotlight. For a while, fans assumed he'd landed on his feet, maybe working behind the scenes or quietly lining up new acting roles. But behind the scenes, Flex and his wife Shanice weren't pivoting into new opportunities. They were in survival mode. The abrupt end of the show didn't just take away his weekly paycheck, it dismantled the structure of his entire career. What looked like a brief career pause was, in reality, the start of a financial landslide. By 2010, everything had collapsed. Flex and Shanice were officially broke. They had lost their house, the home they once believed was a symbol of success, a milestone earned from years of auditions, sitcom rewrites, and music tours was taken from them. Flex later admitted that they hadn't just run out of money, they had run out of options.
Going through the financial struggle just during that 2008 when the whole country was going through it after my show, and you're not working and you have expenses, and if there's nothing coming in to replenish those expenses, money's just going out.
For years, they lived as if the good times would never end. There were no savings, no fallback, no plan B. They weren't reckless, they were just unprepared. They believed in the dream, but the industry didn't believe in them anymore. The foreclosure was a breaking point. The couple packed their things and moved in with Shanice's mother, and her brother, and other family members. At one point, there were 10 people under one roof, including Flex and Shanice's children. The man who once starred as a cool, responsible father on a hit UPN sitcom was now living shoulder to shoulder with extended relatives, looking for freelance gigs just to cover basic bills. They were a million miles from where they had started, and even further from where they thought they'd be. For years, they kept quiet. But in 2014, they made a different choice: to let the cameras in. OWN's reality show Flex and Shanice became their way of reclaiming the narrative. They didn't glamorize the struggle, they didn't sugarcoat the embarrassment. Instead, they let viewers watch them fall apart and rebuild in real time. Flex talked about the humiliation of losing his home. Shanice opened up about crying in her car before job interviews. They revealed their marriage almost didn't survive the pressure. Every episode was a confession. Every scene felt like therapy they couldn't afford. Faith became their foundation. They prayed over bills. They prayed over rejection. They prayed in the kitchen, the bedroom, and the driveway. For them, prayer wasn't symbolic. It was survival. Flex believed that as long as they had each other and God, they still had a shot. That belief became the emotional spine of the series. Viewers saw them struggle, but they also saw them cling to hope, and for a while, it worked. Audiences connected to their vulnerability. The show became a cult favorite, but not everyone watching was empathetic. Some viewers praised the honesty. Others saw exploitation. Critics questioned whether the show was a genuine attempt to heal or a calculated move to cash in on rock bottom. There were articles that called the show brave and others that called it cringeworthy. People debated whether they were shedding light on financial hardship or just monetizing it. The ratings never reached breakout levels, and after 2 seasons, OWN quietly pulled the plug. Once again, Flex and Shanice were left with the same problem they started with: no safety net. The foreclosure, the eviction, the secondhand cars, the side hustles. The overwhelming sense that no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't escape the shadow of what they once had. It all became part of Flex's identity. No longer the sitcom star, but the man who lost it all and had to rebuild from zero. And still, as brutal as the eviction and public struggle were, they weren't the beginning of his downfall. That moment had already happened. Years earlier, when he took a role that nearly ruined his career and made Hollywood turn its back on him before he even knew what hit him. In 2004, Flex Alexander made a bold move. He took on the role of Michael Jackson in VH1's made-for-TV biopic, Man in the Mirror, The Michael Jackson Story. On paper, it should have been a career-defining moment. He was portraying one of the most iconic, controversial, and emotionally complex figures in music history. But the minute the trailer dropped, the internet exploded. And not in a good way. Critics called the casting misguided. Fans of Michael Jackson were furious, and audiences couldn't look past the makeup, the prosthetics, and the obvious lack of resemblance. It didn't help that the biopic itself was poorly received. The Seattle Post-Intelligencer called it one of those tastelessly timed works, pointing out how awkward it was to depict Jackson's life so sensationally when he was still alive and under legal scrutiny. It wasn't just the look, it was the execution. The script was clunky, the timeline disjointed, and Flex's performance was panned for being overdramatic and unconvincing. What should have been an opportunity to show off his dramatic chops ended up becoming a punchline. Flex tried to defend the project. In interviews, he talked about how deeply he respected Michael, how seriously he took the role, and how emotionally draining the process was.
Go in, I sit down. I didn't audition. I'm just talking to the guy, and the guy was just, He was very passionate about doing a piece that was not going to bash him. We're not doing that. We're actually taking it from actual court documents, and we'll just leave the opinion to the viewer.
But none of that mattered. The backlash drowned out the intention. And within days of the film airing, social media was flooded with memes, late-night jokes, and fan petitions demanding that it never be shown again. What Flex thought might elevate him into dramatic territory instead boxed him in. Directors became hesitant, casting agents weren't calling, and fans, even those who once loved him on One, couldn't unsee it. The damage wasn't just professional, it was personal. Flex had grown up admiring Michael Jackson. This was a role he took with pride, not as a gimmick, but as a genuine tribute. But the public didn't see homage, they saw mockery, and that disconnect became one of the hardest pills to swallow. No matter how sincere his intentions were, the perception was locked in. Flex had missed, and missed badly. And in Hollywood, one bad move, especially one this visible, can haunt you for years. After Man in the Mirror, Flex Alexander was no longer the man to call. His name, once attached to breakout potential and sitcom success, now carried baggage. The backlash from the Michael Jackson biopic didn't just dent his reputation. It made producers nervous. Casting directors stopped seeing him as a lead. The phones stopped ringing the same way. And Flex, like so many other stars after one wrong move, quietly began slipping out of the spotlight. He didn't stop working. He still showed up. He had roles in Snakes on a Plane and The Hills, Have Eyes too. But they were background parts, blink and you miss it appearances that barely scratched the surface of his earlier momentum.
Now you have all failed combat and are therefore officially dead.
The man who once co-created and led his own show was now taking whatever came his way. And while there's nothing wrong with that, a working actor is a working actor, the contrast was hard to ignore. Just a few years earlier, Flex had been shaping the narrative. Now, he was barely in it. He pivoted to stage plays, smaller gigs, guest appearances. Some of it was steady, some of it wasn't. But none of it brought back the energy that One once carried. And all the while, the industry kept moving. New faces rose, new shows aired, new talent flooded the market. For Flex, the doors that once opened easily now required knocking, and sometimes begging. The reality of fame is brutal like that. You're hot until you're not. And Flex, despite his charisma and talent, was now part of that long list of stars who were quietly replaced. He leaned heavily on his marriage and faith. Shanice, dealing with her own career downturn, became his partner not just in life, but in survival. They took gigs together, pitched themselves as a package deal. And when Flex and Shanice finally aired, it was clear that both were grasping for a chance to be seen again, not as punchlines, but as people. But even with the reality show, the acting offers didn't pour in. Instead, Flex's image became tied to loss. He was no longer known for his work. He was known for his downfall. And once Hollywood stops seeing you as valuable, it's almost impossible to change the script. When Flex and Shanice premiered on the Oprah Winfrey Network in 2014, it wasn't the flashy, overproduced reality show that audiences had come to expect. There were no luxury cars or dramatic confrontations staged for ratings. There were no perfectly lit homes or red carpet confessionals. Instead, the show opened with a hard truth. Flex Alexander and Shanice were broke, humbled, and living in a packed house with 9 people, including their 2 kids, just trying to stay afloat. It was messy. It was honest. And for the first time in years, Flex had people paying attention again. The idea behind the show was simple: rebuild. Not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually, and professionally. Each episode followed the couple as they tried to secure auditions, chase music gigs, attend marriage counseling, and keep their family functioning despite the pressure. Flex, once the smooth and confident star of One, was now visibly unsure of himself. He talked openly about the shame of losing everything, about the weight he carried trying to provide, and about the deep fear that maybe, just maybe, it was over for good. Shanice, once a Billboard charting R&B singer, shared her own trauma, how the industry had left her behind, how she felt unseen, and how hard it was to maintain hope while raising children in financial chaos. They fought, they cried, they prayed, and through it all, they kept filming. The message was clear. They weren't pretending anymore. At first, audiences responded with empathy. Viewers praised their vulnerability. Some found inspiration in their refusal to give up. In an era where most celebrity reality shows were built around fantasy, Flex and Shanice offered something brutally authentic. It didn't matter that the lighting wasn't perfect. The pain was real. The fear was real. And most importantly, the love was real. You could see it in the way Flex looked at his kids, or the way Shanice refused to let her husband spiral alone. For many families struggling in the wake of the 2008 recession, this wasn't a reality show. It was a mirror. But as with everything Flex touched after One-on-One, the public's love came with limits. Some critics questioned whether the show was exploitative. Was it really healing, or was it just another hustle to get back on TV? Others thought it was too raw, too sad, too vulnerable. There were no quick wins, no makeovers, no dramatic resolutions. Just two broken celebrities trying to patch their lives back together with duct tape and faith. And in the cold machinery of television, emotional honesty doesn't always translate into ratings. OWN promoted the show, but not heavily. The numbers were modest. The press coverage was light. And by the end of Season 2, the network made its decision. Flex and Shanice was canceled. Just like One-on-One, it was dropped without warning. No finale, no follow-up, no formal goodbye. The cameras stopped rolling, and once again, Flex was back where he started. Out of work, out of options. Still holding on to hope, but with fewer people watching. The cancellation hit hard. This show wasn't just their last shot at income. It was their last shot at rewriting the story. For years, Flex had been seen as the guy who fumbled his moment. The biopic misfire. The sitcom fade out. Now he'd tried to reclaim the narrative, to show the world who he really was. A father, a husband, a man with flaws and faith. And it still wasn't enough. It was the cruelest part of the industry. You can bare your soul and still be told you're not interesting anymore. After the show ended, the spotlight dimmed again, and this time there was no stage left to stand on. Flex Alexander didn't disappear. He just had to rebuild in silence. After the cancellation of Flex and Shanice, the cameras stopped showing up, but the struggle didn't. The rent was still due. The kids still needed food. And the offers from major networks? They never came. What remained was faith and whatever was left of his voice. Flex turned back to where it all started. The stage. Not TV sound stages, but literal stages. Small theaters, touring productions, low-budget plays. In 2022, he was cast in the live-stage version of New Jack City, a theatrical adaptation of the 1991 cult classic. It wasn't Hollywood, and it wasn't glamorous, but it was a paycheck. More importantly, it was purpose. In a theater packed with fans, he could still perform. Still feel that surge when the lights hit. Still remember why he started this in the first place. That play didn't put him back on top. It didn't launch a comeback or ignite a streaming deal, but it gave him something just as valuable. Proof that he could still do it. That after all the rejection, the foreclosure, the ridicule, the missed chances, he hadn't lost everything. He hadn't lost himself. Throughout it all, he's never stopped talking about faith. In interviews, church appearances, and social media posts, Flex has credited God with getting him through the darkest years. Prayer didn't solve every problem. It didn't bring back his show, or his money, or his fame. But it gave him clarity. It gave him peace. And in a business that's built on smoke and mirrors, That kind of truth is rare. Shanice, too, has stayed by his side. Their marriage, once tested by eviction notices and career collapses, has become the foundation of everything they've rebuilt. They still do public speaking events together, still make music, still appear at churches and small venues where people remember them not as celebrities, but as survivors. The world may have moved on, but they're still moving, quietly, steadily, on their own terms. There's no Hollywood ending here, no sudden Netflix revival or million-dollar contract. Just two people who lost everything and kept going anyway. Flex Alexander was never the biggest star. He didn't win Emmys. He didn't get invited to the Oscars. But for a moment, he was the guy. A self-made creator, a leading man, a producer, a writer, a dancer, a comic. And even after losing it all, he found a way to keep creating. Maybe that's the legacy, not the show, not the fame, not the fall, but the fact that he stood back up when no one was watching, that he kept working when no one was clapping, that he found value in something deeper than celebrity. In today's world where stars are born and forgotten in weeks, Flex Alexander's story hits harder than ever. He wasn't canceled for something he said. He wasn't caught in scandal. He just stopped being hot. And that was enough. It's a reminder that fame is fragile, and that even when you do everything right, the industry doesn't owe you anything. But beyond the lights and the headlines and the hard lessons, Flex did what few ever manage. He came back from a fall most people don't survive. Not with a hit show or a viral moment, but with integrity, with family, with faith. So what happened to Flex Alexander? He lost everything. And somehow, that's where he found himself. Anyway, that's it for this video, folks. Bye.